Hi, I'm Derek Ashong, and you are now in the stream. Today, why are protesters in Egypt criticizing a deal that promises to reform election laws and strip away power from the military? Our digital producer, Ahmed Shihab Eldin, is here looking out for your live feedback. As always, tweet him using the hashtag AJStream. Also on the couch with us today is National Public Radio Senior Strategist Andy Carvin. He's also been coordinating NPR's social media coverage of the Arab Spring. Andy, welcome to the stream.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We talked a little bit just in the pre-show about some of the challenges of reporting on things when you're dealing with social media, but you have really made a name for yourself at the intersection of mainstream and social media. Talk to us a little bit about the way in which what you've been covering and what all of us have been looking at with the Arab Spring is changing the way people think about news coverage.
Well, I think ever since social media became a mainstream activity for people, there's now an expectation that you can do an end run around the media and have better access to the people who are participating in news events. And it goes both ways, because on the one hand, you've got people who want to see what's going on in real time, but then you've got the participants themselves who want to do whatever they can to get their stories out there, whether or not the media is paying attention to it. And so as we first saw in Tunisia and then has spread to so many other countries, you had people successfully using Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Flickr to get footage out there, to coordinate some of their activities. In many cases, to have that footage get picked up by Al Jazeera and other news organizations, creating a feedback loop of information. Mm-hmm. And so, in many ways, this is one of the first major geopolitical news events of our generation. Of this generation, where you can actually experience it directly by interacting with people on the ground.
Well, it's interesting because people have been saying, are these Facebook revolutions? Is this Twitter revolution? But I think that these are revolutions of people, but the quote-unquote revolution that is coming after them is actually a revolution, perhaps, in the way we cover these kinds of stories.
I think it's definitely one of the revolutions going on. I always get nervous when people use phrases like a Facebook revolution or Twitter revolution, because ultimately people are dying on the ground in order to have their causes move forward.
Yeah, it's not that their losses are digital. This is real life.
Absolutely.
It's great to have you here. Definitely look forward to your insights on today's topic. Remember, we want to know what stories matter to you as well. Follow us on Twitter and use the tweet, or at least send us a tweet using the hashtag AJStream. If you do, we may be able to feature your suggestion in a future episode.
So now it's time to take a look at other stories that you've shared with us. On Monday's show, we looked at how the Occupy Wall Street protests are spreading beyond New York. Focusing on corporate greed, the demonstrations have reached more than 100 U.S. cities now. Although some events are smaller than others, a quick look at the movement's unofficial cyber bulletin board, occupytogether.org, reveals the growing strength of the protests, reaching from New York City to California. But the movement is also gaining global momentum, with protests planned for October 15th in dozens of cities, including Germany, Australia, and the UK. Now, Alexander Araya tweeted this. He said, "This movement is going global. My window in Berlin." Now, if you quickly look at this poster he has, it says in German, Liebe statt Gier, which means love, not greed. Now, online, many have connected the Arab uprising to Occupy Wall Street, and Cornel West, a well-known American activist and intellectual, tweeted this. He said, "Democratic awakening is taking place. It's the U.S. fall responding to the Arab Spring." And Saeed Chowdhury, right here, wrote, "Is it America's Tahrir Square in the making?" And now this video, I'm just going to play a little bit of it for you, which he posted with his tweet. You can hear them in the background chanting, "We are the 99%. Now, they're referring to the fact that much of America's wealth is controlled by the top 1%. Now, U.S. protesters are upset by what they see as corporate greed, while Arab protests have focused on toppling governments. But their methods and their strategies are similar. Now, look at this photo tweeted by Sean Captain. It says, "Cell juicing at Occupy Wall Street." So that's charging your cell phone. Now, this image is slightly reminiscent of images from Tahrir Square. I'll just show you. This is the image from Tahrir Square. Here's another one. Again, people outside protesting and charging their technological devices in order to keep reporting the story. So this story is clearly growing and connecting people all around the world. As Glenn Greenwald tweets, He says, amazing how rapidly Occupy Wall Street's narrative transformed from childish, worthless losers to something important is happening here. Now, those are the latest developments of what's sure to be a growing story. And in the meantime, here are some other hashtags we are following.
Almost 8 months after a popular uprising in Egypt drove President Hosni Mubarak from power, people are taking to the streets again. Tens of thousands of protesters have been gathering in Cairo's iconic Tahrir Square, urging Egypt's ruling Supreme Council for the Armed Forces, or SCAF, to quickly implement democratic reforms. I want you to take a look at this image on my screen right now. Now, this is from some of the latest rallies, and as these protests continue, Egypt's ruling military council has said that it will adopt a new bill that will make it harder for Mubarak loyalists to participate in the coming November elections. It's also promised to review proposals for ending the emergency law as well as military trials for civil offenses. Now, the SCAF made these promises at a recent meeting, actually on Saturday, with a group of major political parties. But activists say that the deal is vague and the timeline for political transition is too long. Now, further fueling some of the controversy and the protests is footage like what you're seeing here, which allegedly shows members of the military, members of the SCAF, participating with the police in abusing prisoners. They've been alleged that torture was taking place, and it's been getting many people upset and fueling the protesting. Joining us now on Skype from a cafe in Cairo to discuss this further is journalist, activist, and blogger Gigi Ibrahim, who was on the forefront of the protest in Tahrir Square against Hosni Mubarak earlier this year. Also with us is Egyptian engineer Sharif Salah al-Din, who is also a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Welcome both of you to the stream.
Hi.
Thank you.
Now, Gigi, tell us, the SCAF has said in response to ongoing protests that they're willing to make these amendments, and they've done so in collaboration with these various political parties. Why are people still protesting?
Clearly, this has not happened. The way the SCAF has been doing this transition with all the signs of all the laws of all the repression that we're still facing, whether it's military trials for civilian, the emergency law, and the new law that was passed of criminalizing strikes and sit-ins, it's a clear sign that the SCAF is not willing to hand over the power to a civilian government, and it's willing only to do so on their own terms. And this is obviously not being taken well in the streets because the protests are going. There are over 250,000 of workers in different sectors on strike. Not just asking for minimum wage and social justice principles of the revolution, but for cleansing the institutions from the remnants of the old regime. And nobody is really believing in the upcoming elections, of the way it has been handled, the law, the process of the election. Me personally, I have no doubt that it will be rigged. It will be exactly like last year's election, if not worse. I'm expecting a lot of violence, and it will not bring about change. The change is coming through the streets and through the revolution.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, Gigi, because there's been some speculation. I was reading an article earlier that was saying that the September 29th protest saw, it was estimating between 5,000 and 10,000 people in attendance, and that the SCAF has determined that perhaps the revolutionary zeal has lost some of its mileage, that they need to be focused more on appeasing the interests of the political parties. How would you respond?
I absolutely disagree. The day actually, September 9th, was the most successful day that we've had. What we've done in the 8 months, we've actually done in one day. There were many protests, not just in Tahrir. There was a march for calling for the independence of the judiciary. There was a protest at the Ministry of Interior. There was a protest at the Israeli embassy, and Tahrir was alive. That we cannot measure the political situation by the role of the political parties. That actually a lot of people in the streets that are taking part of this protest are not part of these parties, and these parties are being slammed every day for their actions of negotiating with the Supreme Council for the Armed Forces, and their really like compliance with them, and how people have, there is like a growing discontent with the military council and
Let's
how
actually
it's
get
performing.
Let's get a response then from Sharif on this. As a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, which did participate in these weekend meetings with the SCAF, you've heard Gigi's argument that a lot of people are dissatisfied. How is the Brotherhood responding to the comments from citizens who don't believe that these negotiations are legitimate?
Well, thank you, Derek, first of all, and I partially agree with what our colleague Gigi has been saying, that what has been happening through the weekend does not exactly match our expectations. But actually, let's talk frankly in this specific issue, is that you don't have a lot of area or space to maneuver with the SCAF. That is, they are the ones to be asked why putting such very tight conditions for negotiation. But what we are doing and what we think that is right now is that we are taking the most out of the SCAF. Recently, as you can see, that one of the outcomes of the this weekend's meeting is that they approved the amendment of the treachery law. And this is one of the very main issues that together all the Egyptian parties and the Revolutionary Youth Coalition have been striving for through the last 8 months. So now we are starting to gain some benefits from negotiating with the SCAF.
Now, Andy, actually, I want to get your thoughts on this, because it seems like the revolution has become more complicated. Now you actually have political parties that didn't have as much room to maneuver taking on a more prominent role, but you still have the activists that some would argue really are the genesis of the revolution still feeling disenfranchised. What's your take?
Well, I think this is something that's common in the wake of revolutions. You're seeing something very similar, in fact, in Yemen right now, where youth activists are mobilizing tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people week after week after week, but then you still have core political insiders who are part of the opposition, but they are still trying to exert a certain amount of power in the decision making that's taking place there. And so I think you're seeing a similar pattern here. And so the question is, on the one hand, you've got revolutionaries who clearly want to see free and fair elections to happen, but on the other hand, in order to make that happen, you have to, at some point, negotiate with the powers that exist right now. And so how does one go about having negotiations with a party that you believe will rig the election anyway? That's tough. That's a very tough position to be in.
Sharif, you mentioned that the military amended the electoral law, but they're still ignoring, the revolutionary groups that haven't formed political parties, as Gigi talked about. Now, Nicholas Slayton on Twitter says, ignoring revolutionary groups seems to fuel the idea that SCAF is working with the National Democratic Party and the Muslim Brotherhood to run the country. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood has been absent from some of the most recent protests, and many people are criticizing the Muslim Brotherhood, saying that perhaps they are the biggest supporters amongst all the political parties of the military. What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, allow me to show you a small demonstration of what is our core idea for such criticism. If you look at this mobile phone from this side, from this direction, as I close it up to the camera, you will only see a small rectangle with width and length, okay? But when you fix it on that way, you will find totally a different area. You will see a camera that it has the ability to see, it has a flash, that it has the ability to light, and it has a sound speaker. so it can speak. So what I mean is that most of the people are right according to the perspective through which they are looking. That is, I'm looking through a certain dimension, so I take my opinions and I take all my ideas through that preference. But when I try to look from another perspective and consider that the other party is not cheating on me and is not treasoning me or making an act of treason, I maybe change my mind or give him an excuse for the opinion that he has taken. That's exactly what we think.
Now,
Is that in the Muslim Brotherhood, it's an institutional organization. So we take our decisions through certain committees that get the data and analyze it to provide input for the decision makers. So we have a certain view that in the recent time, and it has been proven correct, that any movement in the street right now can cause riots and cause big problems as what happened in the Israeli
Sharif,
embassy.
actually, I want to
You haven't
interrupt you,
answered the
Sharif,
question.
for a moment because Gigi was laughing when you were making that initial analogy. Gigi, what are your thoughts?
With all due respect, with your view and your cell phone analogy, I really see the Muslim Brotherhood as a political party that have been corrupted by the regime and has always played politics with whoever is in power to gain seats or to gain to win elections, to be in power. But let me give you an idea of what's happening on the ground. Before the revolution, we had 3 independent unions, okay? And I'm talking about the workers' movement right now and in regards with the strikes and what's going on in the labor movement. After the revolution, we have over 90 independent unions that truly represent workers in different sectors. Now, the role of the Muslim Brotherhood in building these unions is exactly zero. And let's talk about how they denounced the workers' strikes and sit-ins and have not taken part with it. And this is the true revolution that's going on in the ground. Where these workers in different sectors, the teachers, the doctors, the transportation workers, are taking the Tahrir spirit and to get out the mini Mubaraks in their institution, and they're fighting for the revolution. So where is the Muslim Brotherhood from all this? It's playing politics. It's going to negotiate to win elections and seats in parliament. However, this is not the revolution. And I truly believe that the momentum in the street is growing angrily against the SCAF and against the military tribes for civilians, which, again, the Muslim Brotherhood has been really absent of.
Now, I want to get some feedback from our audience on this topic, but Sharif, I would like to give you an opportunity to respond. The Muslim Brotherhood did not play a powerful role in the revolution. Is it possible that there are legitimate allegations that you guys are simply taking an opportunistic position here?
Well, actually, you can ask anybody in the streets to know the real role for the Muslim Brotherhood inside all the workers' associations, even before the eviction of Mubarak from the regime. Secondly, and the most obvious of that, you can see the syndicate of engineers, the syndicate of doctors, the syndicate of pharmacists, who has already been arranging all the riots and the all the protests regarding getting back their syndicates and having an effective role on the street. This is one. Secondly, the Muslim Brotherhood has clearly declared from the first day that we fully agree with all the requests for the workers' movement, but we denounce right now stopping the wheel of production because certain directions from abroad, Egypt, and some who really misunderstood the revolution inside Egypt are pushing towards riots that we don't know where will it end.
Okay, so on that front, Sharif, I'm going to interrupt you because there's a lot of commentary coming in online. Let's try to get some voices in.
Yeah, let's just get to the practicality of the situation, Gigi. We have a tweet from Sarah Mughal saying, from January 28th to August 29th, almost 12,000 civilians were tried in military tribunals. What does this tell us about SCAF's intentions? Now, just before you answer, for any political situation to work, there needs to be compromise. Now, clearly, there's a lot of dissent and dissatisfaction with the SCAF, but you can call for an end to SCAF and you can go to the streets. But Perhaps Jesus Ayala puts the question best, and this is to you, Gigi. He says, do you think that direct negotiations or mass demonstrations are more effective in pushing SCAF to meet the revolution's demand? I mean, it's been almost a year now. What needs to happen?
We don't negotiate power. We actually demand the power, and the legitimacy is with the revolution. And clearly, SCAF has led the counter-revolution since day one of January 28th, when they, took over. I believe that the street speaks louder than any inside table, sitting around in a table discussing what concessions the parties will take. At the end, the masses win.
Gigi, are you saying then that you do not believe there should be a dialogue with the SCAF?
So any
Gigi,
demands
Gigi,
that have
Derek,
been fulfilled right now have only come about because of the pressure from below.
Forgive us for interrupting
you for a second, Gigi.
I just want to make
that there should be no dialogue with the SCAF? Are you saying that from the perspective of the revolutionaries, that the Supreme Council for Armed Forces has no role to play?
They should just hand over the power to the civilians.
But Gigi, is that realistic? Is it realistic? For 8 months, the people have been speaking. For 9 months, the people have been demonstrating, and there's still emergency rule. Now we have a tweet from Ari Amaya Ackerman saying, regarding SCAF, what do you guys, including Andy, make of the army's refusal to release Michael Nabil and many like him, who I know you've blogged about and spoke about, who remain in custody and facing prison and have gone through military trials? So is taking to the streets enough? Is it solving the problems and prompting SCAF to change?
The revolution happened by the accumulation of mobilization in the street.
Right.
I will lose hope once people start leaving the street. And it's not with one protest, with one march, with one day in Tahrir that we will end this military rule. It's a build-up and it's an accumulation. And the more people apply pressure from below, whether through through Tahrir or through the 26 provinces and through the strikes, this is gaining us little by little our demands. Of course, the more negotiations and the more alliances with the SCAF, this slows down the process. But you look at everything we have gained from the viewing of Mubarak trial, from the renationalization of the 3 companies that were privatized, from gaining all the demands, from Mubarak leaving himself or dissolving the NDP party and so on. All this came about by protest and pressure from below.
Gigi,
and
I'm going to ask you to hold for a second.
So it will only continue this way.
I'm going to ask you to hold for a second because, Andy, she's making a very strong argument that the power is really in the hands of the people. But one could look at the revolution and say, if not for the role of the military, the revolution might not have succeeded. Is it possible for them to see democratic reform without the SCAF playing a role?
I think it's going to be hard to avoid it because no matter what type of election you're trying to organize, at some point someone's going to have to set up the election rules. There are going to have to be bureaucrats in place. There are going to have to be election monitors, whether local or international. There are all sorts of things that just have to fall into place in order for an election to proceed. And one could certainly strive to have all the power handed over to the people and start an election from scratch, and you could argue that's what's been going on in Tunisia.
Yeah.
But SCAF is taking a very strong position, saying that they should be the ones who help push this forward. And so at the moment, at least, they still have a lot of cards to play.
Yeah.
And so unless they get in a weaker position because the public is completely turning against them, there's going to have to be a period of time where someone's going to negotiate with them, ideally in good faith.
So on that note, I want to ask all of you, Gigi, Sharif, Andy, to stay with us. We're going to continue this conversation in the post-show. Last word goes to you, Ahmed.
Well, I just want to make sure in the post-show we can talk about the case of Michael Nabil, who you can see on my screen right here is holding a sign that says, دولة مدنية لا دينية ولا عسكرية, which means, civil society, not a religious one, and not a police state.
Okay, so we will be talking about the case of Michael Nabil in the post show. He's been detained, sentenced to 3 years for insulting the military. We want to look at what's happening with justice on the ground as delivered by the SCAF. Join us at stream.aljazeera.com. Use the hashtag AJStream to join this conversation. We will see you online. Hi, welcome back to the Post Show. We're talking about Egypt post-revolution. The Supreme Council for the Armed Forces is currently in charge of the country, and we want to look at what kind of a job they're doing and what response the people are having to some of their proposed changes. Now, Ahmed just raised a very important issue, and that is the case of Michael Nabil, and you brought this up yesterday, the developments in that show, and there have been some recent developments since then. Talk to us a little bit about his situation and what is the news of today.
Yeah, we were talking earlier with Andy just about the fact that, it's been over 42 days, 43 days now that he's been on hunger strike, trying to, drive the point home that there should be an end to military tribunals, and that, his family wanted to make the appeal, which was now postponed to October 11th. And everyone in Egypt, online, I think, and also in the streets, is discussing this issue. And we have a couple tweets that came into us. Now, it's important to point out that Michael his story is a contentious one, because he is portrayed to be and has proclaimed to be taking somewhat of a pro-Israeli standpoint in terms of not willing to serve. He's come out and said he doesn't want to serve in the Egyptian military because they, he would never want to fight against Israel. Now, I'll just read two tweets. Headship Sit says, Michael should be released and then expelled to Israel. Egypt is no place for Arab Zionists. But then we also have a tweet from Hiba saying, yes, I fully support him. No military trials for civilians under any condition. Do I agree with his opinions is another matter.
So I want to see if we can get Gigi to speak on that. So Gigi, if you're still with us, what is your take on the case of Michael Nabil?
Michael Nabil, whether you agree with him politically or not, should not be tried in military court. I mean, this is not the subject. The subject whether he was politically correct or not. I mean, a lot of people say that he is a supporter of Israel and so on, and this is why maybe there was criticism. But the fact is, it's not just about Michael Nabil. I mean, of course, my full support and solidarity goes with his family and the demand for him to be free or to be retried in a civilian court. But the fact that there are over 12,000 people being unjustly tried in a very fast, vicious military tribunals, and with Michael Nabil going on a hunger strike for 42 days, 43 days today, he's facing like the last hours of his life, basically, and we need to stop all military trials for all civilians, even those who committed crimes, even those murderers and thieves and so on. We have a judiciary system that is civilian courts that could try them.
Let me get Sharif's thoughts on this. Sharif, since the Muslim Brotherhood has been in dialogue with the SCAF, what efforts have you been making to end the practice of giving military trials for civilians?
Yes. If you can check out on the website for the Freedom Justice Party, 3 hours ago only, they have their newest declaration mentioning two main points: that we refuse totally sending civilians to military tribunals, and this is agreed upon, and I agree totally with my colleague here. And the second is that we also denounce that sending back the presidential elections after finishing the Shura Council. It's a too long area, and we also urge the SCAF to finish up this interim period the soonest as we get the parliament with an Egyptian parliament, free Egyptian parliament for the first time in history, and delivering the power of the president to the parliament until making presidential elections following directly.
Now, Andy, what's your take on this? Because the SCAF is making a lot of different promises. There are a lot of things that are said to be possible, but you look on the ground, emergency law is remaining. They've attempting to postpone the presidential elections till 2013, and you see this ongoing usage of military trials. Could it be that the SCAF is simply paying lip service to democratic reform while they consolidate their own power?
Well, if you were trying to consolidate power, wouldn't you want to keep potential opposition forces busy with each other in different ways? I mean,
Absolutely.
politically, I think it makes sense for them to bob and weave as necessary. And I think they're sincere in some ways, they're very insincere in many others. And the challenge is figuring out what opportunities there are to actually make them make real democratic gestures and which ones are clearly just the lip service that's typical in games of politics. And that can be very hard to sort out, especially in a situation where democracy is still new.
Sharif, we have a question coming directly to you from Anna of Arabia on Twitter. She's asking about the role of women, which of course is an important one in the context of these revolutions in all these countries. She says, does the Muslim Brotherhood platform include segregating public sectors by gender?
Well, actually, as everybody can check that out, that we have several women from the Muslim Brotherhood movement that are running for the upcoming parliamentary elections. That is, there is no kind of segregation, but women are actually working in the fields that they would like to be in. So they are going into medical part, they are going into parliamentary, but they're not moving out and running in the streets. But even when we have protests that has been agreed upon with all the political parties and all the revolutionists in Egypt, they go down to Tahrir Square. I actually get my wife with me and she urges me to come with me.
How many women are in leadership in the Muslim Brotherhood?
Because in the Muslim Brotherhood, there is the Muslim women have their own separate organization.
That
so
sounds like
in the Irshad
segregation.
office.
That sounds like it's segregated if they have their own separate organization.
Well, it's a norm not to mix women with men in our idea, and I think that both women and men can have the right to do such a thing, but it's not segregation.
Okay.
Well,
They
we are
have
lucky
their own fields of movement that differ from the men's one.
We're fortunate we have a
especially
woman
during
in,
Mubarak's era,
actually with us today. So Gigi, I would love to get your thoughts on the role of women in the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, I don't know much, but what I know and what I've seen and what I've spoken to people about is that the Muslim Brotherhood within itself is very hierarchical. It's very dictatorial. They, like he said before, they have a certain mechanism of decision making that is very top down. And I see, and this is my opinion, that they cannot have democracy within their own institution itself. So how do we expect them to be democratic when they are in power? And truly, like, I don't know, but women in the revolution have taken part in the front lines just as much as men, if not more. They have initiated strikes, led protests, chants, got arrested, got tortured, even, got their virginity checked in the museum on March 9th by the military. And, for them to be segregated within the Muslim Brotherhood as a political party or movement, that doesn't surprise me because this is the way they do business anyways.
Okay, so we actually began with Gigi. So Sharif, you're going to get the last word on this. Can the Muslim Brotherhood basically be an effective leader in a democracy if you do not, as Gigi is alleging, embrace democratic ideals within your own organization?
Well, actually, I'm not surprised that Gigi says such an idea because she's not involved inside and she doesn't know the mechanisms that I've already mentioned for decision making. But let me ask a question. That the top council in the Muslim Brotherhood is called the Councilation Council. So the Councilation is a part of the main democracy. It's Maktab al-Irshad. So the Councilation Committee or Councilation Council, they only take their decisions according to Councilation from the base. So they come to us as personnel in the Muslim Brotherhood and make the poll about a certain issue,
Sharif?
and then yes, and
Forgive
then they
me.
raise the votes, and accordingly they take the
I'm going to
decision.
interrupt you just because we're running out of time, and there's one question we want to ask you about the votes and the Islamic vote specifically. With the Salafists running, do you think that the vote will be divided between the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafis?
Well, for us as Muslim Brotherhoods, and I think for all the objective Salafist brothers, I don't think this will be any problem, because we are not going to choose our next president by his intentions or his direction, rather than his program and the policies that he will show. Because we need in Egypt a strong president that everybody agrees upon to build this country. Not saying that he's somebody from the Salafi or somebody else, but according to the serious program that he is going to present to the people.
Sharif, thank you so much, and thank you, Gigi, both of you, for joining us from Egypt.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now, Andy, I want to get your thoughts on some of the complexity of what's going on here, because we got this tweet as we're going through the show from @JacoStoop regarding the case of Michael Nabil and his not wanting to join the Egyptian military. He says that it's not entirely true that it's because he's a supporter of Israel. He says that Michael Nabil didn't want to serve in the Egyptian army because he's a pacifist, not simply because of Israel. It seems that a lot of these questions of foreign policy are playing a very important role in what's happening on the ground. How do you think the nation is going to be able to address that?
Well, I think in the case of Michael Nabil, at least as I've observed it playing out, it seems to me much less about Israel and much more about what it means to have free speech, freedom of expression, freedom of the press. And he didn't go out and set something on fire. He didn't destroy a government building. He wrote a blog post, and it got him arrested. And so what we're now seeing is there's this sidebar conversation happening about how does Israel factor into this.
Yeah.
And all the while he's on a hunger strike, and it could literally be a matter of days before he dies.
Do you think the issue of Israel distracts from some of the key internal questions?
I think it can. I think in any case, in any political situation, there can be third rail issues that cause people to suddenly take their eye off the ball and focus on that for a while, rather than addressing the issue at hand.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that understanding how free speech or the lack of it is going to be dealt with is probably just as important as any other issue that's being discussed. And so hopefully there will be a more discourse from that angle as well.
Well, that's the last word for today. Thank you so much for that, Andy. And thank you, Ahmed, once again, as always. And thank you, our audience, for being with us today. This conversation will continue online. Use the hashtag AJStream as always. We will see you online.